Story 1. How I Learned About Sex. About what? Rolling Stones Magazine, October 1975. I learned about sex in a laundromat. The setting wasn't my idea, it was my mother's, who had brought me along on wash day to break the news. I was 8, and my first thought? Big deal. I'd rather play with Hot Wheels. Ronnie Miller, on the other hand, was the first kid in school to latch onto sex, while the rest of us got our thrills in saying an occasional or Ronnie was well onto words I have never heard, but supposedly were used to describe the female parts. He would drop straight-faced lines like, "Would you ask Anne to let me borrow her vulva?" And we would ask, not knowing, and she would answer, not knowing, "I don't have one." And Ronnie would double up in hysterics. But then Ronnie Miller did always carry himself like he knew the big secret. One hot afternoon, a couple of us accepted an invitation to go swimming over at the Miller house. It had the only pool in the neighborhood. Once inside his room, while we were changing into our swimsuits, Ronnie finally unveiled his treasure. "Want to see something?" he boasted. "What?" I asked. "Pictures." "What kind of pictures?" Relishing the ritual, Ronnie smoothly pulled out a well-thumbed cachet of pulp sheets, thinly disguised as marriage manuals. He flipped me a copy of Sexual Customs Through the Ages by somebody, PhD. I immediately realized that the sex act was nothing I had imagined. Somehow I assumed it was a kind of medical transaction, like getting your tonsils checked. That took place in the bathroom or a doctor's office. But this was something totally different. It looked extremely uncomfortable. Oh, it looked boring. My reaction was not unlike the other three guys in the room. Big deal. Let's go swimming. By the fifth grade, things had become more interesting. Through eavesdropping on my older sister Cindy, I was clued in to the wide world of making out. When she and her girlfriends locked themselves in a room to listen to Gary Lewis records and gossip about the kissing merits of their dates, I was right there listening at the door. They would chat in shrill tones for hours, belittling everyone from Billy Regatz, the hot rodder down the street, to basketball star Dave Anderson, with frantically juicy stories of clumsy groping. "So he leans over and kisses, right? With rubbery fish lips, right? I almost had a cow, but what could I do? So he finishes, right? And he has the cornball stupidity to say, 'Did you feel it too?' I almost said, 'What, your fish lips?'" This was more like it. All of a sudden, sex was no longer weird pictures under Ronnie Miller's bed. It was intrigue. They only caught me eavesdropping once. Cindy opened the door unexpectedly, and I fell inside. After that, I stuck with listening in on the phone extension. There was one guy who my sister and her friends never ran down. Big Jim Randall, the Indio High School Raja's star halfback, a real bitchin' fox. Scheming on Randall was mysteriously futile, though. Sure, he returned their awestruck glances in the hallway, but he never dated any of the girls. Some rumors had him being just too shy. Others had him secretly married to a 35-year-old woman in L.A. No question, Big Jim Randall was an enigma. I answered the phone the afternoon he called my sister. "Hello, can I talk to Cindy?" The voice was low, almost hollow. "Who's calling?" "It's Jim Randall." I immediately realized the major historical importance of this call. Not telling her who it was, I called Cindy to the phone. She picked up the receiver in the next room. "Okay, I got it. Hang up, Cameron." There was no way I wasn't staying on the line for this. I made a clicking noise with my tongue. It worked. "Cindy?" "Who's this?"
"Jim Randall."
"Hi, Jim." Her nonchalance was amazing. "What's going on?" "Well, I was just trying to find you at lunch yesterday. You weren't around." I was in detention with Mr. Copeland." "Oh, no wonder." His thoughts seemed to take an extremely long time to crystallize. "Wow." "I'm sorry I missed you." Cindy helped. "Me too. Listen, I just wanted to know if you felt like going to the Sun Air tonight." Asking a girl to the Sun Air drive-in on a Saturday night was about as overt as euphemisms for making out got. Cindy balked. "Gee, Jim, I don't know. I don't think my parents will let me." Silence. "That's drag. Why don't you tell them you're going someplace else, like the library or something?" "Well, okay." "And I'll pick you up there around 7? "Okay." Being an unusually bratty younger brother, I discreetly hung up and ran into the living room to let my parents in on the scenario. When Cindy came in to tell them about her library plans for the evening, they responded by grounding her for 2 months. About a year after that, my sister finally spoke to me again. My mother also devised a method for cutting down on Cindy's future makeout activity. She would wait up for her to return home from a date, then closely inspect the lips and declare, "You've been kissing." This invariably ended in Cindy shrieking, "Leave me alone! You can't tell anything!" and storming into her room, where she studied her own lips in amazement. "How can she tell?" To this day, my mother still won't admit to the bluff. "I can't tell," she says. For years, kissing was a complete mystery to me. First of all, wouldn't the two noses get in the way? Second, what's all this about using your tongue? Not until my 7th grade graduation party did I finally figure out the procedure. Deciding it was as good a chance as any to learn, I joined in on the customary kissing game, spin the bottle. When it came Sally Brown's turn to spin, I prayed that the bottle would stop in front of me. What better recipient of my first serious smooch than the girl I had had a crush on for the entire school year? Seconds later, staring down the nozzle of a 7-Up bottle, the sudden realization struck me. I had no idea how to kiss, and I was about to make a fool of myself in front of not only everybody else, but the girl of my dreams. I would have given anybody anything to be any place else. As it turns out, my first real kiss wasn't such a terrible flop. A bit awkward, yes, but not a disaster. I had made it through on instinct, and I thought she might have even liked it. I made up my mind to call her the next day and ask her to the movie. This was it. The big L. The next day. "Brown household, Sally speaking." "Hi, Sally." "Hi. I was just sitting here waiting for you to call." "You know who this is?" "Of course." This was too incredible. "I just thought I'd call and say hi. See what you're going to do this summer." "Hold it." Sally cut in. "Who is this?" "Cameron?" "Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I thought you were somebody else. I thought you were my boyfriend there for a second." "Your boyfriend? I thought you were Ronnie." "Ronnie?" Somehow, I knew what she was going to say. "Yeah, Ronnie Miller, you know him?" Our family moved out of Indio the next year, and I began going to an all-boys Catholic high school in Riverside, California. Every other Friday night, there were mixer dancers in the gym with the neighboring all-girls schools. The boys would first collect on the football field to sneak a few beers and wait until 9:30 when it was fashionably late enough to enter. The idea, of course, was that you weren't supposed to look too eager. You weren't supposed to act like you were aching to get inside that small gym with 300 girls who hadn't seen boys in 2 weeks. After we were all inside and the live band swung into their first usual 5 Proud Marys a night, the proceedings were always the same. Everyone paired off and climbed into the bleachers for a couple of hours of teen lust. The real secret, though, was to climb under the bleachers prudently. It was the only way to avoid, at the height of second base passion, squinting into a chaperone's flashlight. Transferring to a co-ed Catholic high school in San Diego for ninth grade, I soon discovered that just being a warm male body wasn't enough anymore. This was a city whose youth were still locked into a beach blanket time warp. You had to be a surfer, faced with the depressing realities that I didn't have blonde hair and I couldn't tan anyway. I had to find my niche. I began writing for the school newspaper. 20 articles, and several months later, I realized nobody read the school newspaper. Well, so much for that. I took my work to a staff meeting of a local underground paper, the San Diego Door, and was given a post in their music department. My first assignment was to go backstage and interview a fairly well-known San Francisco group that was opening for Fleetwood Mac that Friday night. I decided to casually ask Karen Wilson, unquestionably the most sought-after girl in school, if she wanted to come along. She agreed. This was an ingenious power play of sexual politicizing. One date with Karen Wilson would prove that being a hoodad wasn't the only way to succeed with San Diego girls. We showed up backstage shortly after the group's set, and their road manager took us to the dressing room where the band was surrounded by friends and hanger-ons. I set up my tape recorder and started asking questions. A few minutes into the interview, a rugged-looking blonde roadie in his mid-20s walked into the room and began herding the extraneous people outside. "Come on, let's go. The boys are trying to do an interview," he approached Karen. Their eyes met. "You didn't have a sticker," he said. "Come with me and I'll get you the right pass." I didn't see Karen Wilson until Spanish class the following Monday morning. I played it cool nonetheless. "What did you think of the concert?" She giggled. "I didn't see the rest of the concert." But I never worried about being branded a loser, for the assumption was that anybody even remotely connected with rock and roll enjoyed the sordid attentions of a world of mascara-smeared groupies. As I got more and more into rock journalism, even my parents sat me down for lectures. "Cameron, we don't expect you to ignore normal desires. Just please be careful about getting any diseases." It was difficult to explain to them that on a groupie's priority scale, an interview of third bill acts for an underground newspaper had to be somewhere between gospel singers and Sunday morning disc jockeys. My first real confrontations came at 15. I was on the road with Lee Michaels for a few days, and one night, after a show, I found myself in a hotel room with Lee, his drummer, and about 10 Seattle regulars. Everyone was quietly staring at the midnight special, no one saying much. After a while, I turned to say something to Lee. He wasn't there. Neither was his drummer. I turned back to the television set. Steely Dan was playing, probably out of boredom. I laughed nervously. "I think I want to watch Steely Dan." Trudging back to my room, I couldn't help but wonder if I had blown an opportunity that might take some time in presenting itself again. Ah, well. Not long after that, I was in LA to interview Rick Wakeman, then of Yes. Photographer Neil Preston, my best friend, and I were playing pool in the Beverly Hilton bar and waiting for Rick to join us. I was leaning down for a shot. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," Neil snapped his fingers. "Remember Josie Wade?" "Sure." Josie Wade was the attractive divorcee mother of a girl we both knew. "She likes you. She wants you to call her up." Neil pressed her scribbled phone number into my pocket. "Come on." I was doing my best to pretend to concentrate on my pool game. Will you let me play?" "Don't believe me then?" Neil shrugged. "You really should give her a call, though." He laughed and fished out of his bag a promotional picture of Keith Reed holding a silver platter. "Josie's right there for you, on a silver platter, just like Keith Reed." I lost the game as quickly as possible. "You'd tell me anything to win," I grumbled. "Give me a dime. I gotta use the bathroom." I left the bar, and I looked for the nearest payphone. Story 2, courtesy of The Right Words at the Right Time. Cameron Crowe, May 2002. It was the winter of 1968 when my 15-year-old sister decided she wanted to have a weekend getaway with her boyfriend. The plan was to go up to Idlewild for a few days of snow and possible romance and bring me her 10-year-old brother as sort of chaperone. Our parents didn't like the idea. In fact, they grounded us for even suggesting something so creative. And that's how we ended up spending a Friday night imprisoned in our bedrooms while my mother held one of her study groups upstairs. My mom was a teacher at San Diego City College from the late 1960s to 1993. She taught self designed courses in psychology, speech arts, and philosophy, and regularly held study groups in our small book stuffed 2-story condo. That particular Friday, I sat in my bedroom sulky and glum and listened to my mother and her students talking in the living room above me. About halfway through the study session, one of the students appeared in my bedroom doorway. She had navigated the narrow stairway and stacks of books in search of a bathroom, but instead found me. She looked like a vision of early beatnik style in her oversized glasses, big maroon sweater, and her long brown hair. She was very cool, a beautiful egghead. Well, hello, she said curiously. Hi, I replied, and the sounds of life brought my sister from her room next door. Bummer to be here on a Friday night, my sister said, isn't it? The young woman shook her head, her Joan Baez hair flowing, her eyes earnest and wide behind her giant glasses. We're here by choice, she said. We wanted to come and talk and hang out. My sister and I looked at each other in utter confusion, waiting for her to reveal the joke. Your mom is really cool, the girl offered excitedly. She's the best teacher I've ever had. I wish she was my mother. We were aghast and fascinating. It's striking to hear someone that cool finding greater cool in your own mother. Cool? Mom? In that blinding moment, I knew that we had to give our mom a chance. Hearing this student made me realize that my mom was also a person in the world. She was a valuable teacher, and I decided that I would try to listen, not just as a kid, but as a person too. I knew my sister still had her journey to go on before she would be ready. She would one day follow too. From that moment on, sometimes reluctantly, I listened to my mother. Her basic message was to value humanity with good humor and live up to yourself in the world. And always, she dispensed most of her wisdom in the form of painstakingly culled quotes. She could read volumes of dense philosophy and distill the essence into 2 or 3 electrifying sentences. Even now, she has quotes for every situation. When I'm facing a particularly rough time, I'll often hear the buzz of a fax coming in. Inevitably, it's a fax from my mother with some words or thoughts about strength and positivity. She's on constant spiritual alert for her kids. Now, I'm a parent with 2-year-old twin boys, and I often think about what great parenting really means. All parents have a responsibility to teach and inspire their children. And all kids have a responsibility to let their parents teach and be a good listener. There's something more important, or dare I say it, cooler. For more than 40 years, my mother has been an amazing parent and on duty teacher. In November 2001, March of Dimes named her one of the Mothers of the Year. She deserves it. Here are just a few of her greatest hits. Alice Crow's top 5 favorite quotes. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. Camus. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. Seneca. I am not full of virtues and noble qualities. I love, that is all. But I love strongly, exclusively, and steadfastly. George Sand. Become the most positive and enthusiastic person you know. H. Jackson Brown Jr. 10% is what life brings to you. 90% is what you do about it. Alice Crowe. Story 3. The Backstage Pass. Rolling Stones Magazine, May 2003. It doesn't necessarily mean you're with the band. My first pass was supposed to be at the Artists Gate at the San Diego Sports Arena. The concert featured Yes and Black Sabbath, and I was stranded outside with a tape recorder for many hours, waiting for a road manager to appear with my name and then escort me back to interview the opening band, Wild Turkey. The backstage gate was guarded by an angry, scrawny man in a yellow checked jacket who took great delight in telling me that my name was not on the list. Never would be. And I was to go to the top of the ramp with the other girls. Not that I will remember that menacing guard or his name for the rest of my life, Scotty, or even the name of the kind concert promoter who eventually took pity on me. Thank you, Larry. And it was Larry who knew the power and the iconography of the Backstage Pass when he finally pulled a stack from his pocket, withdrew one, and handed it to me with great aplomb, bestowing a key to the castle with simple advice. Put it in plain view, he said, and look like you belong. There are unspoken traditions that accompany the hallowed Backstage Pass. First, though you are always advised to place it prominently on your person, never place it too prominently. There must be a careless take it or leave it air to the location of your sticky pass. Never place it in any obvious or prideful position, and always avoid any place a conventioner might display a name tag. This garish display is reserved for the girlfriends of DJs or the parents of the artist. Best location, upper right thigh, where a jacket might partially conceal it. This allows you to nonchalantly reveal the pass to any curious security guard and hide it from envious fans in an audience who sometimes rip and run. Larry's prophetic words still apply. Look like you belong means essentially never expose your thrill of being in the rarefied world of backstage life. Assume a pleasant, though ho-hum, demeanor as you step over cables, stroke casually past video cameras filming for MTV, or bump into Brad and Jennifer. Which brings us to another unspoken backstage tradition. And this is important. Aggressively avoid looking at the actual stars of the evening. A casual peripheral glance is fine, but given the choice of staring directly at a gorgeous Gwen Stefani in full stage attire or nearby exit sign, there is no contest. The exit sign wins. And the interest you show in any object or person other than Gwen adds to your mystique and increases the odds that Gwen might speak to you. Such are the complex dictums that govern all that flows from the coveted Backstage Pass. The original sticky style Backstage Pass lives on, of course, but it has spawned many siblings. The bigger the tour and the larger the road crew, the more ornate the selection of styles and levels of access. A Paul McCartney or U2 tour will employ lanyards, clip-ons, and various colors of hospital-style wristbands, sometimes featuring special artwork provided by the artists themselves. These boutique passes are designed to vector guests into many different stations of importance. One colored pass might send you into a room full of international journalists. Another might introduce you to the artist's relatives. One more thing to remember, even if you have been given the ultimate status pass, the all access pass, you must never, repeat, never go on stage with the band, unless invited by the band members themselves. Many have stumbled onto this last step to greatness and found themselves swiftly whisked back to the cheese trays with the international journalists. There is another slightly more sordid style of Backstage Pass. This pass, made famous by the hair bands of the 80s, is actually a secret color-coded sticker given solely to groupies or potential groupies. The wearer may never fully know the special significance of the color or cryptic pass they've been given by a friendly roadie. But a band member spotting this pass will know exactly what it means. She's single. She's probably available, and her date has been vectored to another room with the international journalists. And if all this gets too confusing, just go discover a brand new band playing a small club before it's even designed its first sticky pass. You'll find no assistants, no bodyguards, No palace level security. Walk in that unguarded door and tell them you love their music. Just remember one thing: look like you belong.